YouTube, this is Kelly with Books I'm Not Reading, and today is my first video in partnership with Brian at Bookish to talk about poetry and to learn a little bit more about one poet each month. I think both of us feel fairly uncomfortable, but we're trying to teach ourselves, we're trying to learn and share that with you along the way. I don't doubt that there are many of you who know much, much more about poetry than I do. Here we go. So the first poet that we decided to look at was William Butler Yeats, who lived from 1865 to 1939. So he died when he was, I think, 73. He's an Irish poet, and I think part of what is so intimidating about Yeats is this is his biography. Like, look how huge this is. Oh my God. I mean, because he lived such a long life, I mean, a lot happened to him, clearly. And also, I think maybe his poetry changed over time. Our friend Harold Bloom had to say that Yeats was probably the major poet in English of the 20th century, surpassing Thomas Hardy, Robert Frost, Wallace Stevens, T.S. Eliot, and Hart Crane. And then this is another book that Jason and I own. And they said about Yeats that he was considered by many to be the greatest poet of the 20th century. And finally, well, this is what I got for Valentine's Day from Jason. Thank you, Jason. And I mean, this is about reading poetry, and there is a section about various poets. And but they're very brief. So what they had to say about Yeats was that he transformed himself from a late romantic poet to a modern poet with a wild, vivid voice. And then here's the actual poems. This is the collected poems of Yeats. Look how big this is. I mean, how many pages is this? You know, I don't know. These are some notes here in the back, but I mean, 500 pages long of poems. So he was very prolific, and I think, again, for me at least, that's part of what makes it a little bit intimidating to to look at this. I asked Jason to recommend some of Yeats' poetry, and but I also really wanted to learn a little bit more about the author. So in addition to what I've just shared with you, just a few other facts. He was very interested in Irish nationalism. He had an unrequited love of more than 20 years. And finally, when she said she wasn't going to marry him for the last time, he ended up marrying Bertha Georgie Hyde Lees. She was 25 and he was 52. But she was a medium, and Yeats was very influenced and interested in the occult. I believe he actually believed in fairies. But anyway, with Georgie, she did the kind of automatic writing sort of thing, and so Bloom says that Spirit spoke to Yeats through her 450 sometimes. So it's a lot of visitations there. But anyway, so I find that kind of interesting. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1923, and the poem that I'm going to read today was also made into a song by Lorena McKennett. There is an Irish song before it on the CD, so you have to just kind of wait a while until you get to actually The Two Trees, which is the poem I'm going to share with you. But I will try to find a good YouTube recording of this, and I will link to it below so you can hear it. I think Yeats would like it. I don't know why I think that, but I do. This is The Two Trees. Beloved, gaze in thine own heart, the holy tree is growing there. From joy the holy branches start, and all the trembling flowers they bear. The changing colors of its fruit have dowered the stars with merry light. The surety of its hidden root has planted quiet in the night. The shaking of its leafy head has given the waves their melody and made my lips and music wed, murmuring a wizard song for thee. There the loves a circle go, the flaming circle of our days, gyring, spiring to and fro in those great ignorant leafy ways, remembering all that shaken hair and how the winged sandals dart. Thine eyes grow full of tender care, beloved, gaze in thine own heart. Gaze no more in the bitter glass, the demons with their subtle guile lift up before us when they pass, or only gaze a little while. For there a fatal image grows that the stormy night receives, roots half hidden under snows, broken boughs and blackened leaves. For all things turn to barrenness in the dim glass the demons hold, the glass of outer weariness, made when God slept in times of old. There through the broken branches go the ravens of unresting thought, flying, crying to and fro, cruel claw and hungry throat. Or else they stand and sniff the wind and shake their ragged wings. Alas, thy tender eyes grow all unkind. Gaze no more in the bitter glass. So, just a few thoughts on the poem. This one for me is much easier to read the rhyme scheme. Some of Yeats's poetry, I found myself having to emphasize really hard on certain words to make things actually rhyme. But this one, I like kind of how things are echoed between the first stanza, which is beloved, gaze in thine own heart, and then the second, which is gaze no more in the bitter glass. And I liked the echoes of things. So the first one we have gyring, spiring to and fro, and then the second part is flying, crying to and fro. The first one is remembering all that shaken hair, and that's the part about the loves, which loves is capitalized, so it could be the spirits of love or references to gods and goddesses related to love in mythology. So they're dancing around and shaking their hair. And then in the second part, the demons, and then the ravens, and they shake their ragged wings, alas. So I think so Yeats wrote a lot of poems about growing old, even when he wasn't old. And I think some of this is about that. Like, it could be the gaze no more in the bitter glass, I think definitely is more about a mirror. And so it could be about the vanity, like don't gaze too long into the mirror, focus on the beautiful things in the world, as well as, like, as we get older, like, you know, remember the beautiful things that we saw in our youth, you know, the loves dancing in a circle and shaking their hair and that sort of thing, Whereas as we get older, you know, I think he makes reference to the roots half hidden under snows. Again, snow being white, and obviously, anyway, so, but I do think it's more of a commentary on vanity, and it could be vanity as we get old, right? You know, think about all the things we do to try to prevent ourselves from growing old. Women, I think especially, will identify with all the products out there to help keep us look young. And I think Yeats was trying to say, like, you know, that's damaging to our soul. The first stanza is gaze into thine own heart, and the second one is gaze no more in the bitter glass. So there's something poisonous about staring in the mirror too long, and worrying about getting old, and worrying about what we look like, our appearances, that the true glory, the true beauty in the world is not the exterior, but it's what's in our heart. So it's a very, very rudimentary thoughts on the two trees. So again, we're just starting this, so I am excited about next month. We're going to be reading Sylvia Plath, so I hope you will join us and watch that video as well. But please, please feel free to share your thoughts and your wisdom about Yeats and what he's about. And if you like him, I'm feeling like my own education was seriously lacking when it comes to poetry, because I may have read a Yeats poem like in some anthology in high school or something like that, but I was very surprised when I started looking into some of these books, and you know, people calling him the greatest poet of the 20th century, and I'm like, why don't I know more about him? And it could be true in different countries. I'd be really curious to hear those of you who live in the UK and especially Ireland, like, you know, do you spend a lot of time in school studying Yeats, or, I mean, is he still very revered there? How is time treating Yeats? So I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and I wish you a great day.